Yes.
Woo, good job. All right. So we are recording this meeting, and as always, it will be available for you to watch, and as well as the PowerPoints on our website, just as in the past. But we are thankful for all those that have come today in person. This is the first time that I've had to actually meet a lot of you in person, so it's much appreciated for those that took the time to drive here, and for those that are attending online. Thank you for taking the time to still join us and learn about organics management. Those that are online, just make sure that you do mute your computers and phones. And if you do need to chime in, you can raise your hand, and we do have somebody monitoring the chat. And other than that, Jeff will actually send his email if for some reason your chat is not working. And I think that's all of my housekeeping notes. Again, thank you and welcome to the August 10th joint meeting for the Ohio EPA Solid Waste Management District Work Group. We do have a couple updates from our Ohio EPA. Ernie will talk first a little bit, just do a brief thing about MMAC and the subcommittees there.
So we have two subcommittees that we're working with through MAC at the moment. We have one. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the state solid waste plan or the goal for providing recycling opportunities. There's a waiver provision in there so that if you're having difficulties, you can get a waiver from having to actually meet the goal and still get your plan approved. That's in there, but we don't have a process for it. So we're working on that at the moment. We're working with, I believe, Jamie and Hannah from Adams Claremont on that. So we hope to have something out soon. We're working as quickly as we can because we know a lot of you are going to be in that situation where having for that, we will have more on that. Then MAC has had multiple discussions about the difficulties of communicating consistently when there's a change to the material mix that they're collecting. And so we have another committee that's working on kind of a best practices for how you communicate when there's going to be a change to the materials mix. We've met a couple of times as a subcommittee, but at this point in time, until we can get the MRF operators all able to talk, we can't really go any further. So they're not really willing to all meet in person because of collusion and stuff like that. They don't want to share their information. So we're going to try to meet with them individually first and then convince them that has nothing to do with that so we can get together in groups. Rumpke is really kind of pushing that. They said there's no reason for us not to all be in the room together, so we just have to meet with them first, get them all on board. So that's where we are at the moment. We'll keep you updated as we get further progress.
Thank you. Michelle Mountjoy is our rules coordinator, and however, she is on vacation, so she gave me her update for me to read. So Rule 19 is the Municipal Solid Waste Landfill Operations Rule. It is out for interested party comment until August 18th. The current rule, OAC 3745-27-19 is 26 pages long, and DEMWM believes that reorganizing the rule into a new chapter in OAC chapter 3745-535 will allow for better layout and more clarity. The current rule is being rescinded. Many of the requirements have stayed the same, but you can find a list of notable changes in our IP fact sheet, and that fact sheet link will be included in our chat and also sent out in our follow-up email that I send out. The next one is the notary requirement rule. DEMWM has been working with Common Sense Initiative Office, the division of the Lieutenant Governor's Office, to identify rules where a notarized signature is required. A rules package is being prepared for interested party review containing the proposed removal of these signature requirements where appropriate. Other upcoming developments is the transfer facility rules are up for their 5-year review. and an early stakeholder outreach was released last year. Look for an upcoming IP draft in the next month. And so with limited changes, beneficial use rules are also due for their 5-year review and had an ESO last year released. An IP draft in the works will be released soon as well. And then I will also put Michelle Mountjoy's email in the chat and include it in our follow-up after the waste group or the work group meeting to get her information out if you have additional questions for these rules that are being proposed. So that concludes all of our Ohio EPA updates. Now, I'll turn it over to Erica here in person. She is Oswego.
I just had a couple of things to bring up. Obviously, we have a meeting directly after this portion. And then wanted to thank Beth Bramer for speaking during the MMAC on that Senate Bill 119. Appreciate you being there for me. I was unable to make that today. And then the only other thing I wanted to bring up is that we finalized the dates. We are AOR, OAL, PRP, and SWANA finalized the dates for the 2023 Partners Conference. It's October 25th at the Graduate Hotel downtown Cincinnati. If you want more information on that, visit AOR. That's all I got.
This is a second to fix this background.
Sorry, Erica. No one was laughing at you, but they were laughing at that.
I thought I looked up.
And you're like, why is everyone laughing?
I want to be meeting there.
If you go to view, is it under view?
Todd, are you happen to be? Oh, sorry. Todd, do you happen to be online?
To go to gallery. I think it's gallery.
Yes, I'm here.
Fantastic. How about you take your share button and share your presentation, and maybe we can correct our screen while you're doing your presentation. So next we have is Todd. I don't even know how you say your last name.
Kleinsmith.
Kleinsmith, Executive Director of America 250 Ohio. And he is going to talk about this project that is coming up that we should all be aware of.
Sure, great. Thank you, Lindsay. I was initially going to have a short PowerPoint, but we've been having some connectivity issues, so hope you don't mind. I'm just going to be verbal today, but I appreciate having a few minutes to share with you. My name's Todd Kleinsmith. I serve as the Executive Director of a relatively new state commission, technically called the Ohio Commission for the U.S. Semi-Quincentennial. And using the word semi-quincentennial frequently turns out to be the thing that you end up talking about. So we think it's a little more user-friendly to call ourselves America 250 for Ohio. But we launched this commission last year, and it is about steering Ohio's participation in the nation's upcoming 250th anniversary, which all culminates July 4 of 2026. And, you know, we are still fairly early on, but we're in public awareness mode right now. So we wanted to make sure you all have some idea of what's happening, what you might anticipate coming down the pike. So, you know, we have 3 years to plan. I think if we waited till 2025, it might be too late to make some plans. But we're still early on. We have lots of ideas about how Ohio might participate in the nation's 250th. So you can learn more about us both online and in the Ohio Revised Code. So I'm sure a lot of you spend your time looking at the Ohio Revised Code, and you can find us there in section 149.309. I'll probably put that in the chat for anyone that wants to look at that later. And we also have a website. You can find us at America250-ohio.org. So that's America250-ohio.org. We have a 29-member commission. We have a small staff. Right now, we're about 5 people. And we are charged with having 88 counties engage in the nation's 250th. So there's a lot to do, not a lot of time to do it all, and spearhead a lot of the work. The first 6 months of our existence last year, we were very focused on producing this, which is recommendations to the people of Ohio, sort of the low-hanging fruit. So there's a lot of different ideas in that. We didn't have, you can find that on our website, by the way. It's referenced as the recommendations to the people of Ohio. So when you get a chance later, take a look through that. You'll see lots of different ideas. As I mentioned before, we want to have all 88 counties engaged, not all in the exact same ways, of course. So we have a lot of great things that we can do between now and 2026. Our commission goes away in 2027 by law, but if we're good at what we do these next few years, we're confident that the impacts of our work will far outlast our commission. So just to give you a quick idea of some of the things that we may do, we've already produced, you may recall from the Ohio Bicentennial from about 20 years ago that there was a big effort to paint barns for that. And so kind of borrowing on that legacy, we have at this point commissioned one barn that was done in June along US Route 250. So we're very excited about the possibility of theming up some of our work along the US Route 250 corridor. And some of you may know that links Lake Erie in the north to the Ohio River on the state's eastern border where it goes into Wheeling. So we think there's a lot of possibilities for some great projects along the US Route 250 corridor. You would find our first barn was done in June in Wayne County. And so we had some good media coverage from that back in June. We're also going to be doing some tree plantings, borrowing on the idea of Liberty trees. We may end up calling those remembrance trees, but we're hoping to get all 88 counties interested and involved. That all lies in our future, so we don't yet know what the execution of that looks like yet. But with all of the work that you are all doing in local communities, we hope that you can play a role in that if you choose to do so. One of the other things we're working toward is having a draft template for all of our 88 county commissioners to consider passing a resolution to say that, yes, our county is going to engage in America 250 these next few years. And, you know, they can choose to participate in whatever ways they choose to. They could set up a local community, or I'm sorry, a local committee, for example, and work with us that way. So we don't want to prescribe how counties would engage. We have lots of ideas and expertise, and we hope to connect a lot of dots along the way here, but it's not about how can counties serve our purposes at the commission. It's about how can the commission serve the purposes of how the county wants to get involved. And I say counties, but we also anticipate a lot of local cities, villages, townships to get engaged as well. So I could easily talk for another half hour about all of this. I think instead I'll put a couple things in the chat. I appreciate having a few minutes to just put this on your radar screens. If there are future meetings that you think you would like for us to participate in, I'm going to include my email address in the chat here. If it's not me coming, maybe one of our commission members would come. We've got former governors on our commission. We've got state legislators. Some people are appointed to the commission. Others are on there because of the role that they play as an executive director of an organization or a board president, things of that nature. So we're still fairly early on, so we're not ready to hand over a finished product, but we hope that a lot of Ohioans around the state will engage with us and help shape that engagement in these next few years. So with that, don't want to hijack your meeting. Thanks for giving me some time. As I say, I'll put some things in the chat, and if you have questions, just shoot me an email later. Thanks so much.
right, that was a good update, and thanks for bringing that to our attention. I agree, you can't just start the last second and get it to happen. Next, we are going to get into the beef of our work group meeting and a topic agenda, which is organics management. And we have Dan and Allison here in person. I don't know if Lou had made it online yet or not.
I'm here.
Oh, you in person. Fantastic. I've not met you in. So Lou is here as well, and we're going to get started with permitting and requirements. And take it away, you guys. And Lou can start kind of, you're the backbone of how this all started.
Okay, so Lou Vega from Marin County, and I thought this was an important topic because I was looking to obtain a grant to do some composting in my community. And after some dialogue with some folks, it turns out there's a lot of permitting requirements for a compost facility that I was completely unaware of. I think most solid waste districts, if they're looking to enter into composting, should be aware of these permitting requirements because a lot of them have to be in place prior to receiving the first piece of food waste or whatever kind of composting you're desiring, whether it be yard waste or not. And so in my case, the very first thing I had to do was determine whether or not I was going to have to register as a composting facility and require that license to do so. So Ohio EPA does require that most facilities register as a composter or as a compost facility for class 2. Generally, that requires some financial assurance. It requires that the site meet the specifications of how EPA puts out there. It also requires annual licensing fees, depending on the amount of material you're bringing in. It requires daily logs and annual reports to Ohio EPA. So these are all things that solid waste districts have to be aware of as we're starting to venture into organics management, particularly since the state of Ohio is moving towards a zero waste goals. And I believe organics food in particular makes up about 24 to 25% of what ends up into the landfill. So it is absolutely going to be an avenue that most solid waste districts are going to have to take on as the state is moving towards that zero goal waste or that zero waste goal. So that is the composting part of it. But I guess I'll let the EPA maybe discuss a little bit more about the permitting requirements that they're looking for, since they're the experts in that field.
Well, let's not go that far. I don't know if we're experts, but Allison is. Right?
You're not.
Right. So good morning, everyone. My name is Dan Sowery. I oversee a non-regulatory program within the agency. And what we do is we help keep businesses, communities, and others out of trouble. We help them complete any of their permit type of requirements, record keeping, reporting. We have a grant program that we can fund a variety of different types of recycling related projects. And we recognize communities and others for going above and beyond these regulations. So in short, that's what we do. And Lou, if I remember right, I was hoping maybe you could highlight the experience that you or maybe a member had worked with one of our confidential and free staff up in Northeast Ohio.
Yes. So I did work with, and her name is eluding me right now, but she was
Miranda.
Thank you, Miranda.
Baratano.
And she was most helpful in providing me with all the information I need to move forward. And it was a lot. So, you know, I just spoke about one component of the permitting requirement, which is to register as a compost facility. In my case, I happen to be exempt from this. And this is key to this, that if you are a residential composter or if you have a compost facility that's less than 500 square foot in aggregate, and that means the composting vessel as well as the curing area, you can be exempt from having to register as a class 2 compost facility. However, a lot of that's predicated on the type of composting you're going to be doing. So if you're going to be doing windrow, generally it's going to require a lot of real estate. And most likely you will have to register as a compost. And there's vermicomposting, there's static pile. In my particular case, I went with in vessel. as my method of composting. And I got lucky that I did not have to register. Now, that's not to say that as the program grows, I won't have to down the road, but for now, I've kind of squeezed out of that. But that's not the only permit you're going to have to look at. In my particular application, I am going to be using a macerator / dewatering system. And so now I start dipping my toes into wastewater permit. What do we do with that water? Well, it's going to go down to the sanitary sewer. Is your sanitary district licensed for pretreatment? Do they have a pretreatment program? And if they do not have a pretreatment program, then you will have to register if you are what they consider a significant industrial user of that treatment plant. In my case, I am not. We're probably going to be looking about 100 gallons a day or something like that. So it's not going to be a significant. But if that impacts the wastewater treatment plant by more than 5% of the capacity, and or if it's over a certain amount per day, you will have to register for that. Now, that takes you into another application that you might have to do. So in my case, the wastewater treatment plant stated that at the most, they might require some kind of filter prior to reaching there. But any kind of holding tanks that you might store that water in, or any kind of pretreatment, may require a permit to install. That also has to be approved by Ohio EPA. So that's a second component. What are you going to do with that water? Now that's during the actual process. Then there's a third part here about water, is that what are you doing with the storm water? So as that rain is falling through the curing piles, you have essentially created leachate. So what are you doing then for that? Do you have to then come up with a wastewater mitigation plan that has to be approved by Ohio EPA? In my case, I am covering the curing piles to kind of offset that a bit. Another concern is an air quality permit. So air quality is determined not only by the piles that you have curing, but also the trommel screens that you might be operating, the skid steers to load in and load out, the actual truck traffic going in and out of the facility. All of these are metrics that the EPA will measure to determine whether or not you need to qualify for an air permit or not. So again, this is just some of the permitting that I had no idea that I was about to dive into when I applied for a grant for an in-vessel composter. And I was thoroughly confused. And again, thank you to Miranda for walking me through this step by step.
That's fantastic. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go a little bit further into the weeds talking about the permitting requirements. But Lou, we need to hire you into Ohio EPA. You have a very good understanding of these requirements. That's fantastic. So first, we'll turn it over to, where on earth did she go?
You just took a call.
Okay, we won't turn it over to Allison. I will skip this part and we'll go back to her. So let's build on what Lou had started, and Allison will get right back with you here in a second.
I apologize.
No worries. So as Lou was talking about, the equipment that you use to process composting, if you have composting operations in your solid waste management district. Here I'm showing what is called a tub grinder, and it looks like a big giant wash tub that you throw a bunch of trees and organics and other stuff in, grinds it all up. What we're really concerned about on these pieces of equipment and pieces of equipment like this screener are, I might have some calculations thrown on here. What we want to do is we want to find out how much dust is basically coming off of any of these operations. Now with composting, typically the moisture content is so high, you don't have dust coming off of this, of what we would call particulate matter 10 or PM10. You probably heard particulate matter 2.5 with a lot of the fires and stuff going on. We're looking at PM10 and we're looking at dust, essentially. We're not concerned about the engines unless the diesel engines can put out a lot of air pollution. However, if they are not stationary, meaning you're going to move them around on that site or some entity in your community is moving them around, they are not considered a stationary source. Therefore, they're not subject to air permitting, the engine itself. But you do have to figure out the emissions for any of the dust that comes off of this. Again, as Lou was talking about, we have a group of free and confidential experts that can help anybody in your communities or in your solid waste management districts that need help with these calculations. We can do it all for free, do it all confidentially, and we can help them get into compliance. Another thing, and this is one I don't know that you had mentioned, Lou, that roadways. If you have a roadway going into your facility and you're generating a lot of dust, and I'm not talking about a public roadway, I'm talking about your actual roads on your property, or maybe you have just your work zone in general, you have a lot of vehicle traffic going in and out of there, kicking up a bunch of dust. There's a good chance you might need an air permit for that. But again, all different types of, there's exemptions that exist. There's general permits, there's permit by rule, which is a type of exemption. There's a de minimis exemption. There's a lot of ways for us to kind of triage your situation. Sounds like a lot of permits, but it's actually pretty simple. And if you work with one of our staff, we can certainly get you in compliance real quick. So you had also talked about stormwater. One thing I want to mention about stormwater, a lot of folks misunderstand this one. Lou has a very thorough understanding, and I'm thoroughly impressed. Stormwater comes from what it sounds like, from storms. So it could be hail, rain, sleet, snow, and you know in Ohio that all happens in 24 hours, right? So when you have any type of precipitation and it hits any material you have stored outside, there's potential that you're going to have leachate running off of that. And that's where these stormwater regulations come into play. There are two different types of stormwater permits that you may need to get, or that an entity may need to get. First one I'm showing here is the construction stormwater. So this is if you disturb over an acre of land. And what does disturb mean, right? It means you're going in with some type of equipment like here with a bulldozer and you're clearing off all the vegetation. If that, and I don't know why I said vegetation, but I did. But if you clear over an acre of land, you've removed the vegetation, you will need to get a construction stormwater permit. Again, it's one acre in size. Now, keep in mind, if you're doing, so this may apply to solid waste management districts in your relative communities, regardless. If it's a project, let's say maybe it's a housing development, each one of those individual lots is under an acre, right? But the whole project as a whole is definitely over an acre, where they're going to be disturbing over an acre of land. It still throws you into this construction stormwater permit. Basically, it requires that you submit a notice of intent to Ohio EPA of, hey, I'm going to be starting the construction activities on such and such date at such and such address. And then it requires that the entity develops a stormwater pollution prevention plan, which is a comprehensive document that talks about all of the best management practices of how you're going to mitigate any of that dust-laden type of water coming off of your site. Big example is retention ponds. A lot of us are familiar with retention ponds used during construction activities and post-construction. Another one is the black silt fencing that you often see along the roadways where they're doing road work. That's a silt fencing used specifically to keep the muddy water from getting into waters of the state. The other one, as Lou was talking about, based on the standard industrial classification code for composting operations, they are triggered by an industrial general stormwater permit as well. So same thing, they need to develop a notice of intent. They need to submit a notice of intent, develop a stormwater pollution prevention plan, and then follow that throughout the life. Based on some SIC codes and some operations at facilities, it does require that you do benchmark sampling, which basically means what this individual is doing here. They're playing in a stream maybe, but they are taking some samples of some runoff off of that particular site. You have to have those analyzed by a lab and make sure they're within certain parameters, benchmark parameters that the permit sets. All right, and Lou, one thing that you did bring up that I did not, and I failed miserably, so I'm just going to admit it right now. I failed miserably. I did not add in the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination. So if you do have leachate running off your property and it's going into a storm drain or other types of conveyance into waters of the state, you will need to have a National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit from Ohio EPA as well. All right, one tool I wanted to point out real quick that we have that any of your folks can use. If you know of businesses in your communities that are looking to start a composting operation and you want to navigate what type of regulations are going to come into play, this Permit Wizard is a wonderful tool that we have. It can sum up, like when I was talking about dusty roadways, it can sum up, here are all the different types of questions that we need to ask you so we can figure out what type of permit or exemption would come into play. So check out this Permit Wizard. If you scroll down to the bottom of any of Ohio EPA's web pages, you'll see this thing called Resource Hub, and that's what's listed in the blue bar there. Click on that and you can work through the Permit Wizard to determine what type of permits or exemptions that the operations may apply for. And you'll notice I'm putting these QR codes up in the top corner. I thought these things died like years and years ago, and then I watched the Super Bowl and every other commercial had a QR code. So I'm going to start using QR codes more. But we have a non-regulatory group in our agency that specifically helps businesses. We focus our businesses, or we focus our attention on the small business needs, where it's businesses that don't already have a full environmental suite or a consulting firm set up or on their payroll, but folks that really have no clue and they really need some help. As Lou had suggested, he worked with Miranda Garitano. She is absolutely fantastic, as are all of our staff around the state. They can help these entities. It's all free. It's all confidential. Anything that they share with our non-regulatory group cannot by law be shared with the regulators within Ohio EPA. Here are, and I am really screwing up because Miranda just changed her name and I was calling her Garitano. It's actually, or is it the other way around? I have an outdated slide. Okay, well, her first name's Miranda. But we have contacts around the state. So these are the free and confidential contacts. So for any of you in certain solid waste management districts, please jot down these names, these contact information, and I'll give you my contact info afterwards as well on the last slide. But these are the folks that you would want to reach out to if any businesses in your communities or your solid waste management district itself would like to get into the composting world and compost. I don't know why I said it that way. Okay. I'm not going to go into detail here because April is going to be touching on this, but we do have a grant program that we can help fund recycling related type of equipment. So those screeners, those tub grinders, the stackers, even equipment to move composting, including trucks, vehicles, loaders. Those are all things that we can help fund. So keep that in mind. Again, I'm not going to go into great detail here because April is going to cover that one. But we did change our cycle a little bit. We moved it up to opening applications in, receiving applications in October, closing those in January. And then you can apply, go into that same resource hub that I showed you where you can find the Permit Wizard. That's where you find all this information. And the grants are competitive, and I'm totally stealing April's presentation. So
You're not even doing it right.
Yeah.
it's the best part.
I'll go over it later, but the grants close December 1st, not January, but we'll talk about that later.
A good time for me to plug the Ohio EPA and thank you for the $100,000 towards the investment compost.
Yes, absolutely.
Good time to plug that.
So now we're going to go back to Allison to talk about specific materials and waste management, solid waste related rule requirements for composters.
Okay, so Dan is the reach out and touchy-feely, I'll help you with everything. And Division of Materials and Waste Management is the regulatory arm at Ohio EPA for composting regulations. So we regulate the composting facilities and we interact with folks. In fact, of the list of everyone, I believe I've worked with every single one of the OCAP in the district offices around the state. So even though it's a confidential, they don't identify to us who is asking the questions, but when they are unsure, they come to us, make sure they're giving the proper information. So we've got actually 4 different classes of composting facilities. The class 1 facility is mixed MSW. We've only had one of those facilities in the state in the entire time we've been doing composting, and that goes back to, I'm pretty sure the first stuff was in 92. And we had a class 1 composting facility for a couple years that was really very minimal amount of mixed. It was actually just more fines and stuff and yard waste. And that was actually up in Medina. And it was cited by Medina and actually run by Brothers, who I know is on the line at this meeting. And then the class 2s, yard waste, food waste, alternative materials. Throughout the years, we've done different projects with folks. The most recent was spent bleaching earth, which is used in oils production or food grade oils here in Ohio. Class 3s are only different from class 2s in that there's a size limitation for class 3s. So a class 3 is 3 acres or less, and then class 4s are yard waste. So the big difference in the permitting is a class 1 is the only one that actually requires a solid waste permit and everything that goes along with the solid waste permit, which is public involvement and submitted engineered plans and all this other stuff. Everything else is a registration. The registration form is fairly extensive, I will give you that, but it asks questions that we think you need to think about in order to set yourself up for success as a facility. So one of the big things that we did in recent years, about 6 years ago, is we introduced the idea of not just a plan view drawing, but calculating for yourselves what your operational capacity is for the materials you take in and what your design capacity is. So that allows you as a composting facility to say, okay, my design capacity is going to be 6 acres, but I want to start out small to make sure that my business is going to succeed. So my operational capacity is going to be 2 acres. So it gives you that flexibility to go back, and therefore you're only paying financial assurance, which Lou alluded to. You're paying financial assurance on the amount of materials that you're bringing in from your operational capacity. So your operational capacity, 2 acres, you're paying financial assurance only on the amount of material you're having on that 2 acres. And as you expand and grow as a business, then your financial assurance will grow, and you'll look at that on an annual basis. So those are some of the things that you have to do as a class 2. It's a registration. That's where your food waste and your organics are going to go as a class 2. So you've got a registration with us, and we're also here to assist you with that. I've got 2 folks who work with me in the composting program, in addition to all of our district office inspector. And we have health department partners. So Lou, did you ever work with either Dave Fetchko or Amy Hollenbaugh?
I actually consulted with them first.
Right. They are our regulatory partners. So typically you think of those folks, oh, well, they're the guys who do landfills. And Mahoning has a couple of those. But they're not just the folks who do landfills. They're also the folks who you can talk to and get education and direction about all types of solid waste facilities. So it's good to be with your regulatory partner and let them know, hey, I'm looking at doing this. So class 2s, you've got a registration. They're the only class that also requires, as Lou alluded to, an annual operating license. And if we've got a health department partner in your area, that license is going to be issued by the health department. If we don't have a regulatory partner in that area, then Ohio EPA issues it. And it's an annual. And the fee for that is a sliding scale depending on how much you're bringing in. And that's actually in the specified in law. And we worked very hard back in the early 2000s to get that changed. It used to be just on the landfill size scale. So the minimum you were paying was a lot more. And we worked to change that to encourage composting facilities and the development of the composting industry in Ohio. So that's your annual operating your annual operating license, and the fee associated with that. So those are your two authorizing documents that you need to have as a composting facility if you're going to look at doing food waste. The less than 500 feet exclusion, that's for folks like Lou that decided to go with an in-vessel. The caution there is that's fine, but when you're looking at whether or not you meet that exclusion, don't just think about the size of your in-vessel. Look at what you have to do with that stuff when it comes out of the vessel. It most likely, not in all cases, but in many of the in-vessel composters, when it comes out, that material still needs to have a place to go to finish curing. So you need to make sure you factor in that amount of material that you're going to be going through into your design so that you know whether or not you're maintaining the less than 500 square feet exclusion. So look at that when you're looking at it. And from a non-regulatory point of view, I would really encourage you to work with other resources. The primary resource in this state that's non-regulatory that can help you out is the Ohio Organics Council. And the folks that make up the council are all composters in Ohio who have designed their facilities to meet their needs. There's some who've been doing it since before the inception of the composting program or shortly thereafter. So they have a lot of experience. The other thing that I would ask you to look at is the possibility of a public-private partnership. Many people may not know, but we have a couple different facilities, prisons, correctional facilities around the state that we're doing public-private partnerships for their composting facilities. And that was, there were several members of the Organics Council that were working on that and are still working on moving forward with that public-private partnership in some other areas of the state. So that is something you can do and something innovative. The benefit there to not just the prison system, but in fact to all of Ohio, was that as part of that public-private partnership, they offered jobs to those inmates who were part of the program. They got training and they were guaranteed a job when they got out to decrease the recidivism rate. And since composting is something we really want to promote as an industry and want to help grow in Ohio, you're going to need people who are well trained to do it. So there's a possibility of partnerships, public-private, Organics Council. There are a lot of people along the way, apart from us as regulators and non-regulators, but still Ohio EPA, to be able to help you and give you a lot of information and find what's right for you. It may be a static pile, it may be an in-vessel, it may be a combination. You may have a lot of land somewhere where you're looking to do something and you can do windrows. You may want to partner with a local composter and split the cost of renting a piece of equipment. There are lots of different things that you can look at for partnerships or some type of alliance. So that I would encourage you, if you're looking at this and you're looking seriously at developing something for your solid waste management district, to think broadly and cast a broad net.
Any questions from anybody? And Lou, is there anything else you wanted to add or other considerations?
On the tail end of all this, so you need all, let's say you've done what you had to do, make sure you had all your permitting input it. At the very end of it, you're gonna have to figure out what application you're actually gonna use to finish compost in. And this is the one I have not ventured in very deeply, but I am of the impression that if the compost is to be sold, for example, that compost must meet some minimum criteria. It has to be tested. Perhaps some form of pasteurization has to happen, meet some certain temperatures for a certain period of time. Do you want to expand on that?
If you are going to distribute the compost, you need to test that compost, and we have a whole list of quality standards that have to be met. And there are performance standards. They are based on the U.S. Composting Council's quality assurance standards. And that happens before you distribute. It's not truly pasteurization, but your compost needs to come up to temperature for a certain period of time so that you kill off any of the pathogens. And one of the, two of the tests that we require in there are looking for pathogens. If you are doing your composting correctly, that's going to happen for you. Your compost, if you're providing the sufficient organics for the bugs to eat, and if you're providing sufficient moisture, then you're going to get those temperatures. You're going to come up to temperature and you're going to hold for a period of time. And that's what you need to do. Long ago, we had standards in there that mimicked the 503, which are the sewage sludge standards, where you have to achieve the temperature and you have to take it and you have to turn it every so often and all this. What we've done is just make it a performance standard. So manage the materials so that you don't have odors, you don't have leachate, and that you're going to be taking those temperatures and making sure that you get the pathogen reduction as the operator. Because it's not going to do you any good if you just take in material and have just a backlog of it, because you're not composting it correctly, so you're not getting the pathogen destruction. So it's sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. So you're right, if you're going to distribute, if you were going to use it solely on your own property, then you wouldn't have to do the testing. But generally, for most folks, unless you're like a large university that's doing it just so they have good organic amendments to put on their acres and acres of garden plots and things, most folks are doing it composting so that they have a material to distribute. And once that compost passes the quality standards, it's now a product and you can distribute it. And the same requirement goes for farmers who are taking this in. If they're farmers and they decide they have a lot of manure and they think they can make a good product out of it, they're more than welcome to do that. They do that under the auspices of their ag permit. But if they want to distribute that material, they test under our quality standards. So it's a level playing field. There isn't someone out there who's getting a free pass and able to distribute their material. They're under the same requirements, and that's in their permits from ag. So if they're a CAFO, it's in their permit.
Any other questions?
The only thing that I would add for districts' benefit, if you are a district and you give out grants to communities or to businesses, make sure in your grant application that they comply with all Ohio EPA guidelines. We gave out a couple grants for organics, and that we just assumed that folks knew that. And so it's very helpful to work with your local district. And so I would encourage everybody, if you're doing grant programs, make sure that that language is in your organics section. So just point that out. Hand hurt from being slapped. Catholic school.
But at least you remembered. So thank you guys for joining us today. We do have one more question. Sorry.
Allison, if you would maybe talk about the timeline of the permitting process from the start to finish, so that kind of understand about how long that would take.
If you're doing a registration, like for a class 2, it really depends on you and how complete an application you send in the first time. If that application, you go through it and you're working with someone either in our central office or in our district office, and you've checked all the boxes, we can do that in a matter of days to weeks. depending on how quickly an inspector gets out there to make sure that the facility is ready to receive material. That's really probably the biggest limiting factor between that and making sure you get your financial assurance in order. Sometimes the banks are a little more difficult to deal with on a timeline and getting that, but that won't hold up your registration, and then getting your annual operating license application in and making sure that moves through. Depending on where you're located, some of the boards of health only meet on a monthly basis. So there might be a couple week delay in that. It just depends on where you're locating. So I said, you know, usually the thing that trips folks up the most is getting everything they need on their plan view drawing, and that calculation for design versus operational. And we can help walk through all that. Either Tony or Angel in my office can help walk through that. And another thing is, if you're looking to site a facility, the siting can be very challenging depending on where you're located in the state. Because we do look at setbacks for waters of the state, setbacks for well fields that use drinking water. So there are different setback requirements. And so it's good to have several places in mind and make sure that you cross-check with either your health department or with one of our district office folks who are more immediately available to go out and maybe look at places with you for proposed areas, depending on their schedule. That's also a good thing. You don't want to put all your effort into designing something and then figuring out that you're too close to something in order to make it work.
Thank you.
Or that you needed a permit that you didn't know you needed. So,
Good
you know, with the other type of permits, I'd always recommend you plan at least 6 months before you plan in operations to get your permit application submitted.
Allison, real quick, if a municipality has an existing Class 4 facility and they decide that they want to do in-vessel organics, food waste, is the Class 2 requirements based on their entire composting operation as far as size and everything, or is it still just the area where the organics will be managed on the same site?
It depends on how they do it. If they can engineer the site, assuming that they own this whole big piece of property, if they can do their Class 4 over here, which is their current site, and they've got an entrance where they can go this way and have their Class 2 over here, then we're only regulating this part as their Class 2. If they've got just this piece, then that's a little more challenging because we've got to have a clear distinction between their Class 2 and their Class 4. Because if you're taking stuff out of the vessel and you're putting it down to finish curing, you don't know, or I don't know at that point, many of our folks don't know whether you still got pathogens in there. So it's going to depend, you know, we've got slope to deal with. You know, you've got to make sure that if you've got Class 4 there already, that your slope is going to be this way and not this way, because this is your pathogen potential. You don't want it running down, and then you've got cross contamination into your Class 4, and then everything is a Class 2. So that you don't want that mess. You want to make sure that you've got those things looked at before you start going there.
So, but specifically,
You got to find a distinction so that when our inspectors go there, they know this is a Class 2 and this is the Class 4. And there's some benefit to that. If you're using in-vessel, it's not as difficult, I would say. But if you're using windrows, then it would be very challenging to be able to distinguish your 2s and your 4, and to make sure to maintain that rating so that you don't have leachate flowing into your Class 4s, because then you've contaminated everything, and everything besides in the 2 and the 4 would be considered to have pathogen potential. So that would be a disaster for your facility.
Let me ask you this question and then I'll shut up. What if they use the organics as a blend? In other words, they run it through, they run the food waste through a process, whether it be a reduction process or whatever, and then they blend it with their leaf compost. Does that make that material still a class 2 material when you do blending?
If they're going to do blending, it depends on what that material is when it comes out of the, if it's straight food waste that's ground up and then put in with the yard waste, then that would still make it a class 2 food waste composting. It doesn't matter whether you chop it up, blend it up, or puree it. It still hasn't gone through a pathogen reduction process. Now, if it was an in vessel and you wanted to make more like a soil amendment kind of thing, you would then test the material coming out of the machine. You wouldn't do any of the stabilization process or letting it sit. You'd test it out of the machine. If out of the machine it met the quality standards, then you would be free to do that blending. So that's everyone, level playing field, needs to meet the quality standards. Or everything that you put that with would be essentially raw food waste and now bumped up to a class 2. So it depends on where in the process. So sometimes not easy to distinguish. And sometimes we don't hesitate to actually give a call to composters that we know have dealt with things for an extended period of time, where they've got a lot of information and experience under their belt, and we'll ask them questions. Sometimes we'll go to academia and ask questions of them. Okay. And Hal is also a member of the U.S. Composting Council, is really our face of Ohio EPA to the U.S. Composting Council, and he will take those questions back to colleagues in other states or at the council to get input on things that are new and innovative that haven't been done before.
Thank you.
Again, thank you. I'm certain that this will not be the only and first time that we will be discussing organics. There is a lot of focus towards organics as we are venturing through the Swiffer grant. That grant will begin in October of this year. It is a three-phase stage of that grant, and there'll be a lot of opportunity for investment and actions, thoughts and ideas. And so we're just hoping that today we can at least introduce you, get you thinking about down the future, introduce you to some of the people that you probably should be talking to now. We understand that it takes a lot of local communities to take ideas and actually get them to talk, get people to talk about it. But we're just trying to build some tools in your toolbox so that we can, as we're having these discussions, that you are up to speed and have some vision of where you and your district is going. And, if that is something that you're looking to include in your bigger plan. So thank you again, Lou, for introducing the conversation and, being here to help explain that whole reality of, we do have some grant funds out here, but we do need to have some thought processes beforehand. And thanks to you guys for helping share real, true information and not the rumor mill. So real quickly, we do have our chief, Nikki. So she stopped in a little bit late from our updates, but I do want to give her a chance to talk and take the floor.
Thanks, Lindsay. And I will be very brief. Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Nikki Lemon, and I'm the chief for the Division of Materials and Waste Management. I started last August, so I'm just shy of my 1-year anniversary. really excited to be here, and I apologize it's taken me this long to get to one of your meetings, but I would love to come to more of them. Please, if there's anything that you need from MWIM, please don't hesitate to reach out. We've got a really great team, and Allison just provided some really awesome information, and the team is very willing to help you all out with organics, and so please view us as a resource. We say tongue in cheek that we're the regulators. That's what we've been for decades. But we are an invaluable resource to you as you your operations and making your plans come to fruition. So please reach out and let us know how we can help.
All right, so thank you. Thanks for coming and supporting everything that we do. So thank you. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to add some more tools in your toolbox. And so we have Tony from Hamilton County resource. I don't know how you even say that. And Andrew Booker from SWACO. And these two gentlemen and their solid waste districts are leading the way nationally to getting our information out to the public and how food waste education, outreach, and how we're actually connecting. We did the technical side, now we have to get people to actually do it correctly. And so these two gentlemen are going to help us bridge and explore that options. So thank you for both coming today.
You start. Sure. Hello, I'm Tony Staubach. I am the food waste diversion program specialist. We went through some restructuring, so I have to think what my title is now, for Hamilton County Resource. So we're the solid waste management district down in Hamilton County. So it's the city of Cincinnati. Most of you probably know Michelle, who's back there. I work for Michelle. So I have to look good today, right? I drove, so she has to be okay with that. If she wants to go back. So I came on a couple of years ago, and we have been running what's called Wasted Food Stops With Us. It's our campaign to reduce food waste in Hamilton County. It's a consumer-driven campaign, and it really focuses on educating consumers on the best practices to reduce food waste. So we have kind of developed 4 domains that we talk about, and it's shopping with a list, serving good food, storing food safely, and sharing the bounty. And so we really work hard with my colleagues in the office to educate consumers at all levels on planning their shopping. Like you have to go out, you have to make some choices, you have to think about what you need. How are you doing this? How are you paying for this? How much is it going to cost? We want to save people that money. We want to save those resources from going to the landfill. We want to make sure that that happens at a consumer level, but also kind of moving into those commercial levels. And obviously it's standard practice at an industrial level to not waste money and buy things efficiently. So good for them. And then we start talking about how to store food safely. So once you have the food, where are you putting it? What are you doing with it? What's the best practice? So we have on our website, wastedfoodstopswithus.org, a digital tool based on the Save the Food tool from NRDC on where to store and how to store food items. And it all comes from research-based education, or research-based approaches. So from the extension system, from USDA directly, from manufacturers of items, if they were pretty standard practice like milk, we don't really need to go to the extension system and find out how to store our milk. The milk companies tell us how to do that already. So all of that is research-based information, and we use that to prepare people to store food so that it lasts as long as possible and looks as good as possible. And then we talk to people about how to serve food. So if you go on wastedfoodstopswithus.org, you'll see that every week there's a blog, and that blog has recipes. And yes, if you'd love to go to wastedfoodstopswithus.org, I'll show you. So on that blog, there's always a recipe. So every week we try to feature how to use a different food item. We do this in partnership with food pantries, with farmers markets, with local grocers. So that's something we try to put out every week. And then finally, we have our partnerships with our food recovery agencies, our food pantries. And that's something that we're always trying to make sure that is really strong and done in a way that's safe and wholesome. And so it's wastedfoodstopswithus.org. That's the SWACO one, Save the Food, Save More Than Food. Yeah. So, which if we don't get up here, it's fine. It's really easy to remember, wastedfoodstopswithus.org. And so again, finally, the last thing we do is making sure our food recovery partners have the infrastructure they need to be able to recover more food, upcycle that food, use it in different ways. And this is our blog. It's loading slowly for some reason. Maybe that means Abby's on there doing some work today. But yeah, you can see we've broken it up into shop, serve, store, share, and then Scoop is the blog. You just go on Scoop and learn about what's going on. We also have in-person events that we hold. We work with a number of chefs in our community to do these demonstrations in various places. So right now at a government subsidized housing complex, we have a chef who's out doing a demonstration for 100 residents on how to use items that they're getting from a pantry this week and helping them learn how to store those. And they're also informing our guide. So one of the things we've learned from our food storage guide is it's written from a very middle-class perspective. And in some of our lower income communities, it's difficult for them to leave potatoes in a cabinet. It's difficult for them to leave apples on a counter. They have bug issues. They've got temperature control issues. So what do we need to do to make sure that we're providing them with the best research-based information so that they can preserve their food? Tonight, I will be going to the Hamilton County Fair to do demonstrations on how to make stock out of vegetable scraps. And then tomorrow, I'll show people how to use leftover flour to make tortillas. And then we also have 3 other chefs who will be at the fair doing these demos. And then we also have an event next month where we're partnering with a food pantry to recover 6,000 pounds of produce and redistribute in a core neighborhood in Hamilton County in partnership with Cincinnati Public Health, Hamilton County Public Health, and a food pantry who eventually will take over this program. So I know that's a lot to think about and hear, but I want to move it over to Andrew so I don't take up all the time, but definitely visit wastedfoodstopswithus.org. There's good information on there, and we put that out hopefully weekly. This week I didn't because I got a lot going on.
Maybe any questions before I go? Any questions?
Any questions for me? Impressive. Yes, sorry.
Jeff, can you put the link in the chat?
I really appreciate you pulling that up.
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, we're going to jump back to the website in a second. My name is Andrew Booker. Most of you know me from a previous career at Ohio EPA. I'm a programs manager at SWACO. I'm really just standing in today for Jane Bowen, who is Tony's counterpart at SWACO. She's our food waste specialist. She's on maternity leave. Jamie Allen right there, who is our intern, who's covering for her through the end of the month. Let's just talk about what we do. Very similar program that we have, the Hamilton counties. If you can just go to the next slide, maybe just start out like why are we focused on this? You know, there's been a lot of attention and a lot of interest in food waste. The last time SWACO did a waste characterization study at our landfill, we were able to document that 15% of the material that comes into the landfill is food waste, which is the single largest component of what goes into the landfill. And so with that, another slide there, you know, partly as a result of that and partly as a result of a lot of the national work that's been done by US EPA and many others on food waste, we convened a group of interested parties in 2018 for the Central Ohio Food Waste Initiative. We then developed a food waste action plan in 2019 that identified 20 solution areas that we're pursuing when it comes to food waste. And in 2020, we established the Save More Than Food campaign, which is really what I'm going to talk about. So we really do a lot of our work, a lot of our public education work, whether it is recycling or food waste oriented, on 2 tiers. We have a district-wide campaign that we push out through our website, through social media, through paid advertisements, paid search, a variety of avenues that we'll talk about. And then we tend to then layer onto that individual community campaigns where we work directly with the community to do a kind of targeted campaign over a couple months, and I'll get into the details of what that looks like. When we start with a district-wide campaign, this is a screenshot of Save More Than Food. Just real quickly, just hop over to that website. It's still open. And it's very, very similar to Hamilton County's website. We have it organized a little bit differently, but it is, super information intensive. We have all kinds of information for consumers, for schools, for businesses, and we have a quiz. We have a lot of blog posts, testimonials, case studies. We have our challenge, to be honest with you, with the website right now is we have too much information and we're trying to kind of distill it down a little bit better. Go to Make a Difference real quick. We're right there. So just click that Make a Difference button if you can. You may not be able to. Just go to At Home if you can. Just scroll down real quick, and we won't dwell on this any more than to say there's a ton of resources on here about how to shop smart, about how to store food properly, about how to do food rescue, food donation, and there's just a lot of information here, a lot of guides, a lot of different things. So encourage you to look at Hamilton County's website, look at our website. There's a lot of stuff that I think folks can utilize and borrow. So that's kind of the central part of our district-wide campaign. Ultimately pushing people to SaveMoreThanFood.org with a lot of information. Jump back to the PowerPoint slides. Really what I want to talk about is just kind of a strategy that we've been utilizing that I think others may be utilized as well. So that's the district-wide campaign. And then if you go to the next slide, sorry, I want to talk a little bit about these community campaigns that we layer on. So what we do is we do outreach to individual communities, and we kind of suggest to them that we do a joint campaign with them on food waste. So typically 6 to 8 week campaign. We have a lot of assets that we've created, communication assets, a lot of electronic assets that can be used, like Facebook posts and other social media posts. We have templated newsletter articles that they can put into their community newsletter, templated emails that they could send out. So we have a lot of pre-made items, so they don't have to do any work that they can utilize. And what we have learned, and I suspect it's true with all of you, is that nobody reads anymore. Newspapers have gone away, so there's no go-to kind of communication method to use that you can reach everybody. People do not watch television, like over-the-air television. They don't watch their local television channel, so it's really, really hard. And even in Central Ohio, we used to have community newspapers that were, targeted towards individual communities. Those have gone away too. So there's like literally almost no way to kind of reach people definitively, except that we found that our local residents tend to pay real attention to the newsletters that they get from their local community. So that if you're in Columbus or Hilliard or any of our suburbs, they almost all have newsletters electronically that are sent or even physically that are sent. And they have a lot of times quite extensive email lists of residents that they send out, monthly emails or quarterly emails. And so we find that if we use the community and kind of set them up so that they're the ones sending the message, not us, that residents pay attention to that. So we work with communities to kind of develop a 6 to 8 week strategy. Go ahead to the next slide. And this is a real world example right here that's happening right now with Dublin. 7 week campaign. There's got a press release where they just say that they're partnering with SWACO to launch an education campaign on food waste. There are 2 postcards that are going to be sent, 2 email blasts, 2 newsletter articles, 17 social media posts, and then we have some ads that we use for our district-wide campaign that will geo-target to those zip codes. That's super full-blown, like that's kind of over the top. Most of them don't really look like this, but Dublin's, they like over the top. So, go ahead to the next one. So these are some social media posts. And again, we've created these for our district-wide campaign, and you can just see that we've dropped Dublin's logo on there on the left. So there's a lot of these things that are pre-made, like we can just use them over and over again with different communities. The one on the right's a little bit more tailored to specifically Dublin. Go to the next one. Again, just examples. These are banner ads and different social media kind of things that we've already created. We have them in a toolkit. We've been using them for a couple years now. You can see that in some cases we can just add City of Dublin, so we can easily update them to be specific to the community. In other cases, we can just generically use a pre-made social media ad. Go ahead to the next one. This is an example of a postcard. So in Dublin's case, we'll do 2 postcards. We will pay for one of them and they'll pay for one of them. So that's kind of our pitch. A lot of times is that we got pre-made assets for you to use. A lot of times they're looking for content for their newsletters and things like that. So they're really happy to have content. And our kind of bargain with them is we'll pay for one postcard and you pay for the other one. Some smaller communities just don't have a budget for that. And in which case we might do one postcard. And we'll still do emails and newsletters and things like that. In this case, we're using a QR code to point them to our storage guide, which is something that we talked about. So if you go to the next slide, just 2 out of 3 pages of our storage guide, just go, how do you properly store food? How do you revive it if it gets stale, so forth? How do you freeze it properly? Things like that. So that's a big push for us right now on our SaveMoreThanFood.org website is the storage guide. Okay. This is an example from the city of Columbus. I couldn't find Dublin's, but a lot of times we do these in conjunction with giving them a grant to stand up a food waste drop-off. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But in Dublin's case, we gave them a grant a couple of years ago. They've got a drop-off that's been in place for a couple of years. They feel like it's a little bit underutilized. So the second postcard will be encouraging people to utilize the food waste drop-off. So takeaways for me is really that residents do pay attention to their community's communications. So utilize that if you can. Make it easy for the communities. Literally, like the newsletter article is a good example. There are some communities, Dublin will be one of them, that'll take a lot of ownership of that. They'll take what we gave them and they'll edit it a lot and make it in their own words. Other communities will just literally take the newsletter article, put the name of the mayor at the bottom, and that'll be, they'll just take it verbatim. So we make it really easy. We have learned that we can't, initially when we started doing this kind of thing, we would have a toolkit that we would provide to here are all these social media posts and here's all this templated stuff. And what we learned is most communities won't do that. They'll kind of express excitement about it, but it's maybe a little too much for them to do on their own. So we literally take a spreadsheet and make a nice schedule with them where literally it's like week 1 with the date. The newsletter article is going to go out to kick it off. Week 2, the postcard is going to hit the mailboxes. Week 3 is going to be social media. Week 4 is going to be the second newsletter article. Week 5, so we have a literal week by week schedule with them where they're doing some of it, we're doing some of it. So it's very, very well organized. And we just find that if you do that with them, it's much more likely to happen as intended. And this is very adaptable. So we have some that's, this crazy full-blown Dublin example. We've got some townships where it might literally be, 1 email blast, 1 postcard, and social media. Half of that 3 or 4 social media that might be the totality of the campaign with a small campaign that maybe doesn't have the bandwidth. I think that might be it. Yeah. Any questions? Of course.
So, and this is really for you and for Michelle, what is your budget for your food waste program, full cost accounting? And second part is, what are your KPIs on the program as far as impacting your waste reduction numbers?
I'm not going to be able to answer either of those questions really. The first one I would say is, and this is always kind of, the awkward part is that Waco is a well-funded solid waste district. We have a $5 gen fee and we're a big district with, over 1 million tons a year that goes into the landfill. You can do the math. On our district-wide campaign, we are spending a couple $100,000 a year. These individual community campaigns are probably run $3,000 to $5,000 depending on what all involved. But we do a lot of things that a district would not have to do. So we do social media boosts. We have I was going to show you our little commercial, our food waste commercial, Meet the Savers. We have a commercial that runs over streaming airways, and we geo-target. There's a lot of stuff that we spend that you really wouldn't have to spend. I mean, if you really think about how you could do this, you could do a postcard. The emails don't cost a thing. The newsletters, the community is going to pay for themselves. You could do all organic social. So they could do the community social. You could do social as a district. So you could really, really lean down the budget on these community levels. When it comes to the KPIs, we actually tested the community campaign, the Save More Than Food information with Upper Arlington. We had a US EPA grant, I think, to do that one, and we did three different iterations in a control group, and we were able to demonstrate really meaningful decrease in the food waste in those parts of the community that got the postcards and got the other. So we've been able, and I think it's 20% reduction in material and a significant increase in the usage of the drop. So we had some data that would show just, very, very specifically, in particular, boost the use of the drop-offs, but even reduction of food waste at the curb as well. One of the things that we learn, I think, and it's anecdotal, but when people start doing food waste collection in their kitchen, to utilize a drop-off or to do backyard composting, they realize how much food waste they're producing, and then they naturally start to reduce the amount of food waste that they're producing. So we put a lot of budget, put a lot of money into this whole thing, but I think the community level campaigns you could literally, you don't have to have a dedicated website like we have. You could have one page on your website about food waste reduction. There's a lot of information, I'm sure, that you link to, and we link to. We've got our own storage guide, so do you, but GREFED, NRDC, WWF, USEPA, there's a lot of information out there already that we point people to. There are a lot of tools, ready-made tools that you could link to from your webpage. I think there's a way to do it in a really costly way.
You have a person on staff that's specific, like you have Jane.
Jamie right now, but we have Jane, yes.
Jane.
Yes.
Yeah, but you have a dedicated, and that they don't filter into other programs. They are focused on this program.
They are very much focused on this program. These programs all filter over. I mean, a lot of our food waste drop-offs are funded through the grant program, as an example. So there's a lot of overlap, but you're exactly right. We have a dedicated food waste person because it's such a priority issue for us. And again, we're fortunate. We have a dedicated person, Sheila here, that does business recycling. I don't know, in the long run, our goal, I think if you would ask us 5 years from now, 7 years from now, whether we'll have a dedicated food waste person, I don't know that we will, because the idea is that that's going to get fully integrated into all of our programming in a way that we won't have to have that. But we do feel like right now it's just necessary. You can see the amount of work that's gone into standing up a website and building a campaign and so forth.
To that end, Andrew, I mean, that's kind of how I see my role in our office. Everybody else works with population, and I'm working with a content area. So when I'm working on a project, it's not me, it's everyone. There's a food pantry that wants to do waste audits, so we are involving our business specialists. There is a school that is wanting to do a share table, so we're involving those staff members. There is an opportunity for educational programs. So today, this morning, on my way, before I left here, when I was getting ready to do my program this evening, I was talking to Elise, who does our educational programs, like, what are the resources I should bring? What are the extra things I should have? Are there things that you're finding are useful for us to do? And then same thing when she goes out, she's doing something on food waste. She's like, are there things that are useful that I should be mentioning? So this is a subject-oriented position as opposed to other people who are population-oriented. So there is a strong opportunity to collaborate. And like Andrew said, like, who knows what the future is going to hold for these positions? I mean, these might be the linchpin that reduces all the food waste. Everybody's efficient. There's no more waste. And there's no need for this type of position. Or it could open up a door for the next phase of organics and addressing those issues. Yeah.
I think of it a little bit like about emerging waste streams, so there will always be another priority waste stream. And we're the same way. I mean, our staff is pointed towards schools or businesses or residents. And, there will be, if we can kind of get to a certain place with food waste and it fully integrated, I anticipate there will be another priority area that there may be an evolution towards. It could be completely unrelated to it. Jim, you had it.
Yeah, Andrew, I was just curious it amazes me in a small district like mine, how many phone calls I get asking about a program. And then I say, well, we have all this on our website and we don't have what?
Yeah.
We don't have internet. And obviously you talked about the newsletters, some of the community newsletters, but is there any other techniques you use or will think about for what I classify as like the greatest generation of folks that recycle during the war years and are very concerned about the environment, how to engage with them on these type of initiatives when you don't really look?
Well, that's the opposite challenge. They still read the newspaper, that is actually the one demographic that you can reach with the traditional news outlets of the newspaper. My father's 90 years old and he still gets the Columbus Dispatch and he still reads it every morning. But it's really hard to find I think that's your only opportunity for them, or what I would call very traditional. We use postcards, and I remember, 10 years ago, Hamilton County and Cuyahoga County, everybody saying, even after the internet was a thing, like, direct mail does seem to work. I think it's working a little less. I think it's a little bit. I do think it's working a little less well. I do think a lot of people just literally don't read anything. It's not dull. But we do use postcards. And we do find if we can make them colorful and we can make that, if we can just make them distinct in some way, that it is a pretty cost-effective way to reach the strategy that we're using, honestly, is to try to use a lot of there is no one way to reach people. And so we're using a lot of different, we're using an email. In Evelyn's case, we're using a billboard. We're using, geo-targeted, social media. We're using direct social media from the community. We're really trying to just get as much, for a concentrated period of time. The idea is that they see or hear something, maybe the first time they don't even read it, they just see something about food, and then at some point, one of those things triggers, I'm hearing all this stuff about food waste. What is it? Oh, I got a postcard. Let me read this. So we're just trying to hit them in a lot of different directions with the idea that we're kind of planting a seed with maybe some of the early communication, and then maybe they take a minute to actually read something at some point. The other thing I was going to mention, with these food waste campaigns, a lot of times we do have this hook. Why would we do it now? It's because they've got a grant and they're opening a new food waste drop-off location. But there is Food Waste Prevention Week every April, one of the weeks in April. And if I was a district who maybe hadn't done this before, I might think about next year, maybe you could find 2 or 3 communities in your district where you could organize, here, all 3 of us in the district are going to work together to do a 1 month or a month and a half long food waste education campaign. I mean, that would be a hook. You could maybe convince them that this, it's Food Waste Reduction Week or Food Waste Prevention Week.
It's April 3rd through 10th.
Yeah. And let's, work together to do this kind of campaign.
To that end, I do think it's really important to remember that the most important marketing tool is you. This is the first time I ever worked anywhere where I have money. Everything I've ever done has been coalition building. And so that continues in this role. It's going out and meeting face-to-face with those connectors in your community, identifying those people who are leaders and will take that message and explaining to them why food waste is a priority in their world. So we have a food policy council in Cincinnati, and the first person you talk to runs food policy council to be like, you have to address food waste. Why were you not addressing food waste? How is this not a thing for you? And then you find out there's some of the little political things. You're like, well, let's smooth that over. And then you're like, now food is the thing. We got that engine chugging, and we're going to, radio stations and talking to them. So there are some radio stations that are in nursing homes or in convalescent care centers, and having those conversations with them and having their staff do articles and speak on these topics. When you're talking about the greatest generation, they were the ones creating the community gardens and the victory gardens. They were the ones who continue to cook at home for a long time. They're the ones who can have this message. They can get on the radio and talk tomorrow about how to reduce food waste because they know how to make stock. They know how to make food at home. They know how to save food that they're growing in their victory gardens. So giving those people the opportunity to be the leaders. I was just telling Michelle yesterday, my goal is not to be the one that people listen to on this topic. There are a million other people who should be leading this conversation. It's to incentivize them to lead that conversation.
You guys have done a great job. We do have one question, and I think you kind of just touched on it at the end here. But out of all of those ideas, and I came from a one-person solid waste district or one-person county, so it was me, myself, and I. So what is that one thing that I could have done to maybe get the biggest impact on this kind of subject? So if I could only do, again, I'm just me, myself, and I, how could I make the biggest impact on this?
Looking at this person from Athens Hawking, they need to call Heather Harmon. So she is a professor at OU. She is a former colleague of mine from when I was at Wilmington College, and we've had wonderful conversation. She's in public health about food waste. And so call Heather Harmon and say, Tony Staubach said you have to do a thing. I mean, that's a great place to start.
How about me that's north, north of here, and I, again, have no university or anybody in my
Oh,
community.
you've got an extension office.
So there you go.
Yeah, I would call those SNAP Ed people and say, Tony Staubach said, because they'll know who I am.
Fantastic.
I worked extension for 8 years. We can call some people. Yeah.
So make sure you're calling out and getting your community partners on board with you, is kind of the message. Again, I think that's a great message that we are not in this alone. Even though that I was a one-person show, I did have a lot of resources that I could tap into. I have a lot of community experts, and again, we're coming to these types of things to build our toolboxes to expand those networks. So make sure that you are getting into those networks, and there is a lot of things that you can do that are simple and organic that don't cost $1 bazillion that can really do make a bigger impact. And it does take, just as you said, one person to start getting that ball rolling and finding those champions within your communities.
Lindsay, so if, Tony, you mentioned public health real quickly, and I would, so my background is public health, local public health for over 20 years. And I would highly recommend that you engage with your local health departments, especially on this topic. They're at various points of the spectrum in their engagement on this, but they are definitely a player in this space. So find out who your local health department is, whether that's like the health education division or the environmental health division, and see how they can partner with you as well and amplify your messages to get the community involved.
It's not a hard sell. They're into it.
Yeah.
Feed people. They want to make sure people are eating wholesome and healthy food. They want to make sure that, this food that's coming from our grocery stores into the secondary food system is still wholesome. And that's what we want. We want to make sure that wholesome food gets eaten. Otherwise, we have to have a plan to manage it.
Even their connection to doing inspections at restaurants is, the partnership that I think we've both done is to help educate on food donation at those restaurants. And so being able to provide information to the restaurants on how easy it is to donate food. So it is a natural.
For adding. Right. The next piece that we have is Ohio Organics Council chairperson, who is Jason Ziss, and he is also Kurt's brother, so he has kind of the whole bigger picture, and he's going to give us an industry perspective and kind of tie this whole big package up in a bow, right, Jason?
Well, I'm going to try, certainly. Here, I'm going to share my screen, okay?
Sounds great.
All right. Can everybody see? Am I coming through just fine? Yes. Take that. All right, perfect. So yes, I'm with the Ohio Organics Council. My name is Jason Ziss. I am the current president of the council. For those of you who do not know us, we are a nonprofit that really is here to promote the growth of organics recycling in Ohio. Really the way we do that is by really connecting people together through research, dialogue, and primarily education with recyclers, producers, and a lot of regulators, actually. So it's a good group of people that really are trying to serve the purpose of just increasing the rates of organics recycling in the state. We are also a state chapter of the U.S. Compost Council. There's our website for anybody who wants to take a look. I will shamelessly plug that we have an annual conference coming up in November, where actually we're going to be talking about some of these topics that you're speaking about here today. So it's something we do every year, but we have really good turnout and provide some really good information back into the community. So I strongly recommend taking a look at our association, because really our purpose is growing organics recycling in the state of Ohio. I was asked here today to just speak in general about industry outlook. So what does organics recycling look like right now from the industry? As were mentioned several times, organics is still one of your largest components of MSW. So when solid waste districts or even the state is looking for ways to increase recycling rates, you look at organics. I'm not going to say they're the easiest things to recycle, but I do view them as low-hanging fruits, because there is really tried and true methods and means for doing so. One question that we get asked a ton is, Jason and the Organics Council, well, what would help you more? Would you rather see more organics being brought to you to be recycled, or would you rather see more demand for the products that you're producing from recycling of the organics? My answer is why not both? Honestly, I don't have an answer that would say, well, it's one or the other. Of course, we would like to manage more material, but we'd also like to move more end products out into the industry. And I ultimately believe that's the best thing for our economy and our environment. From a supply side standpoint, it's really a lot of what you were talking about already. It's really connecting with those groups and organizations and businesses that exist in your areas and territories, and really making them known of the outlets that exist for them. If you don't have outlets for them, maybe it's outside of your territory, but really just trying to serve as connecting the dots for those generators. That way, maybe they don't know that they have options that actually do exist. We get calls about that all the time from different solid waste districts where we operate. Hey, can you take this? Hey, can you take that? Generator X, Y, or Z are interested. And then usually just from a private business standpoint, then we're happy to help and try to manage that organic stream and kind of go from there. The other thing that really can help with supply side is the infrastructure. And this is where the Ohio EPA really does a good job through their grant programs. And I look for additional ones as well. But this is something that we feel is good, but this is something that absolutely could increase supplies by having more infrastructure in place for compost organizations to essentially operate their businesses. It's tough to develop compost facilities. Let's not, beat around the bush. The whole NIMBY stuff is absolutely a real thing. But I would really say that if you're working with all your stakeholders to develop programs together, public-private partnerships, I absolutely support. I think they're really good things. If you get all the stakeholders together, then you can really create an infrastructure that works for the communities that you're trying to service. So really help building that infrastructure and the network absolutely can go a long way in helping increase supply. A lot of stuff that's been happening with developing drop-off locations, I like that. I think if you want to look at an example, Stark, Wayne, Tuscarawas County, they do a really good job of establishing drop-off locations that can then be brought to a central processing facility, like we do here at Kurtz Brothers and Earth and Wood. I already mentioned grants and funding sources. Those are really critical, because there's a lot of people who want to do recycling of organics, but it's not the easiest thing to establish and to get into. The barrier of entry into the industry is really cost and permits, as well as land. So if there's ways to overcome those will absolutely help increase rates. On the other side of things, demand is really something that it's not talked about a lot, but it's something that really could go a long, long way in terms of helping organics move and increasing the rates that we're recycling. I really wish there was better engagement from end users, especially from the public sector. And this can include organizations, such high organizations like ODOT, but also smaller organizations like the communities that you're operating in. Composting and the compost products that are made through organics recycling have a ton of benefits, including stormwater runoff, just stuff for our environment, growing medias, yada, yada, yada. And it's really, I feel like it's overlooked in a lot of the public projects that are being developed anyway, and really pushing for local sources of compost material really could go a long way. That's something that I would really push to support a lot more from an industry perspective, especially public sector organizations like some of you in the room, to look at closing the loop and how you can, even if that's just as kind of taking maybe the information that the prior presentation did, which I actually thought was awesome, and trying to connect how then that end use material could go back into the community in beneficial reuse ways. I think agriculture is going to have a massive play for organics here in the near future. There's new NRCS programs that are going to really help try to support this. And really, when we look back, the main impetus is going to be through stormwater management as well as soil health, which I hold near and dear to me. Next slide. Okay, so some of the common industry challenges that we face is, like I just said, infrastructure is a massive thing that we could really make some strides on here with more facilities. Logistics is the other one. More often than not, when we have generators come to us and ask us about, hey, can you recycle X, Y, or Z? One of the biggest prohibiting factors is logistics. It's trucking, it's how do you collect, and that's a real problem. So setting up, and again, more infrastructure would help cure the logistical challenges that we face, but it's definitely something to consider. How do you get X waste stream to Y generator? That could be really challenging because some of these places, it's bottom line stuff. So if it's cheaper to go to a landfill and the logistics are the prohibiting factor, that's where you really have to be creative. But that's absolutely a challenge we face in the industry. Contamination. You'll hear it from any composter that contamination is probably their biggest issue that they face. Personally, at Kurtz, we don't love brown bag means for collecting yard waste, but we manage it all the time. It's not our favorite, but we as one specific recycler view contamination in different lights than another recycler. So I'd really get to know what contamination or practices that they can tolerate. So that then you can then bring that back to your stakeholders in your community that you're trying to service. There's that notion of compostable versus biodegradable. We who operate compost facilities are going to really choose compostables versus biodegradable. I mean, they're two totally different things. But again, this is where get to know the people who are composting, find out from them specifically what's important to them and what they can accept. Certain means of composting cannot tolerate any type of compostables, where others, end users can. So again, just get to know the people you're working with. We get some frequently asked questions from solid waste districts, and what do you do if you get calls from organic generators looking for solutions? You really should know the people that are servicing your community right now and where are the nearest organics recyclers. And once you set them up as true stakeholders and partners for the communities that you're servicing, then you can really direct the calls to them, and it really works. We're happy to get calls. We follow up. We're looking for more feedstock, more materials, and we have a good relationship with the different solid waste districts that we work with. So really, if you don't know the people who can manage material in your area, you should, or look to others, maybe slightly outside. Again, concerned about the logistics, but that's one thing. The 500-foot exemption for small-scale food scrap composting. So we're not part of it at Kurtz. We don't really have that, but I think it's a really good opportunity for people who want to maybe start something small, see how it works, and then grow it, and then kind of go down that next road of a Class 2 permitting standpoint. So I think it's a really good way to maybe get your feet wet and see if this is something for you. And I think that's a really good way to do that. Finally, what type of compostables do composters want? And that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. BPI certification is kind of industry norm, but again, it's going to be generator specific, or it's going to be end user specific. So just connect with those people. It's a lot more of the same thing. Have good stakeholder relationships, have open communication channels, and let's see how we can put together programs, state objectives, primarily through increasing recycling rates, with some of the other things that compost products can do and other problems and solutions that it can help provide, such as soil quality health that I kind of mentioned earlier. I was told to keep it really brief, so I'm going to open it up to questions. Here's my contact information. Please check out the Ohio Organics Council, and I'll open up to questions.
I did put your website into the chat, so, and I'll get it sent out as well afterwards. But thank you, Jason, for giving us that overview. We do have one question. I don't know if it's for you or somebody else that has already presented, but how do you track the amount of organics?
Is that for me?
Sure.
Sure. I mean, it's real simple if it's coming to me. I mean, we track everything that we bring into a facility, daily logs, but also everything that's going into our accounting system. So I can tell you everything that comes into a facility. It's very simple.
Anybody else have any questions? Thank you, Jason, again for joining us today and taking some time to help us see the bigger, broader picture of where we're heading and some of the industry challenges that do happen to, you know, it all plays into our things all play into what you guys are doing. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks to the Organics Council for all of your work in organics management. Last on our agenda before we do comments is April, and she has our standing time slot here to help give us an overview of our recycle grants and a lot of changes that are happening for this grant cycle.
Lindsay, not too many changes. And I'll just go through this really quickly because I know most of you are grantees or have been grantees, but I know there's probably a few people that haven't worked with us before. So I'll quickly go through very high level about what the grant program covers and then go into those for 24 things. So go ahead. So just real quickly, again, we have grant types. We actually, I guess, 10 plus 5 now with the water bottle refilling station grant. Up to this, it's giving me the eye. But we have the community and litter grant, which is what most of you have taken advantage of. Our academic institution grant, the market development, and scrap tire grant. Again, eligible applicants, local governments, which includes state agencies, cities, counties, villages, townships, you, and health districts. And then for the academic, we do public and private K through 12 colleges and universities, nonprofit organizations, and then businesses with a local government sponsor. I just put a very small snapshot of the types of activities that you can do with this program. This is not an exhaustive list. This is kind of a, just to give an idea, but these are kind of our most popular different types of things. So litter cleanup and tire amnesty events, I think that's probably our largest percentage of grants that we do. The water bottle refilling stations have blown up in the last couple of years. Curbside and drop off, recycling equipment and outreach and education with that, contamination reduction projects, bins, trucks, signage, education, marketing, infrastructure, kind of going back to what we've talked about today with composting. So again, I know Dan mentioned all of the equipment that's involved in composting, but we can also help with like what SWACO and Hamilton County is doing with the outreach and education. You can get grants for that as well. The solid waste management districts. So all of that would be covered under our program, a whole bunch of other things. So the changes, the big change is the water bottle refilling station grant. We are now opening that up. And for the past 2 years, we've just had that eligible for K through 12 public and private schools. So, you know, to help our kids reduce, you know, single-use plastic bottles, help them be more healthy and encourage drinking fresh water throughout the day. We've done almost $1 million to schools, and with we have some additional spending authority, which I'll get to. We are opening that up, so it is now eligible for local governments, nonprofits, colleges, and universities. You cannot combo this. This is a standalone grant. You can apply for multiple grants. So if you want to apply for a water bottle refilling station grant, you can do that and then apply for your other activities in a separate grant. There is no match for this. We want to really encourage these because as the last bullet point says, we want these in places where they're going to be open to the public. So we don't want there to be any barriers to you putting these in. It wouldn't work necessarily for your office building if it's, you know, the 20 people that work in your district building. That's not what we're looking for. Places in your areas that are open, you know, parks, libraries, community centers, places where the public can access these. They won't be scored the same as regular grants will, but they will be ranked. based on how many people can access these on a daily basis. So we are really looking for that, that community involvement. You can get up to $10,000 per applicant. And we actually will be giving that money up front so that you can go and purchase the equipment right away. But because of all of these special things that we're doing, like I said, it will be based on how many people access. So they may not be as eligible for you as an individual or as your district's buildings, but if there's areas in your district, please help us spread the word and let people know that this is available. Next one. The other big, huge change, which Dan mentioned earlier, is the timeline. We looked at this for years. As you all know, we typically opened in the first Monday in November, closed the first Friday in February, and then for July 1st. We were having a lot of issues with that, with using interns for labor. That didn't work because this summer we broke the summer up. We have a lot of events doing zero waste. We want to do zero waste events. Well, half of them are over July 1st, and it also backed up with our fiscal year, and our fiscal department was always getting onto us about making payments. So we decided we were just going to blow it all up and change it. It'll open the first Monday in October, which is October 2nd this year. We will do our normal informational grant webinar that we do every year. Marie put a link to register in the chat. So please sign up to join our webinar on October 10th at 10 a.m. We've moved our grant review deadline back to November 17th. So if you are writing a grant and would like us to review it, as long as you get it to us by November 17th, we will review that and get you some feedback in time to then submit your final application on December 1st. So that's the first Friday in December. And then we will do all of our due diligence and our scoring and our compliance checks and make awards hopefully sometime in March with the grant start date of April 1st. And then I mentioned earlier the funding availability. So in the past couple of years, we've been able to get extra money to spend through the state controlling board, upping our spending authority. The fund, there's quite a bit of money in the fund, but we had only had authority to spend a certain amount. So we have, we're able to get this added into the biennial budget. So this should be a permanent increase now. With the Recycling Litter Prevention Fund, we actually use two funds for the grant program. We should have about $7.5 million to spend from that. With our scrap tire, it's always $1 million. So we're looking to hopefully award $8.5 million in 2024 and hopefully into the future as long as funds are remaining. So we are actually bringing in a little bit more than we were spending. So the fund has grown over the past 5-10 years. So we'll have this much to spend if we get the applications for it. And I think that's all I have on the grant. I completely forgot to put in a slide about our sustainability conference, which is really embarrassing because our team has been organizing that, but that is September 19th, 20th, and 21st, virtual, free virtual conference. There's 12 sessions for a day. There is one on food waste, sustainable agriculture. We're doing one on green communities. There's a lot of different topics that would be really relevant. So I would love for you guys to join that. Marie just put the conference link in the chat. So that'll take you to our website where you can see all 12 sessions and then click on the links to register for those. You do have to register individually. But join us next month.
Thank you. Thanks for always coming to give us updates and keeping us informed. I do have a couple other things that were sent to me as reminders. The business recycling check-in meeting is coming up in September 13th next month. The educator work group also meets quarterly, and today or next month their date. But if you need that information, reach out to me and I'll get you connected with the two ladies that lead both of the groups. We have the OAL PRP Partners Conference coming up in October. Make sure that you're registering for that. For those that have affiliates for the Keep Ohio Beautiful, their awards meeting and annual meeting is November 8th. And that's going to be at the Nationwide Ohio Farm Bureau 4-H Center building. And their grant award application or their award application is being sent out here this month. And what did y'all think about the in-person meeting? Do we like this idea? Want to do it again next year?
Yes.
We had 30 people show up in person, so that's a pretty good start. So thank you for those that attended. Thank you for, again, those that had online. I know that there's things that prohibit you from coming, but I do appreciate, this is my first time seeing most of you in person. So thank you for coming, and thanks for joining us today. And hopefully with this, you'll get a good start in your toolbox on organics management. And we will see you hopefully online on December the 7th. Thanks.